Rolling. This is day one at the Bray Dome in Marlow, Oklahoma. This post right here is embedded in the concrete down in the stem wall, if you've seen that earlier, because we're going to have a big opening going across here. You can see it's going to be about 20 feet. So that's going to hold that corner in check. Otherwise, the weight of the dome is going to want to push it out this way. And this is the neat thing about a panel dome for all you want to be dome builders out there. You notice that the plywood, the decking is already on, the windows are already on, the roofing is actually on this. Now, there's more to the roofing than this, but the first two coats and the fabric of the Elastomeric are on there. So once it's erected, you'll be about 80% done with the roofing. You have to seam the joints. See that joint? We'll come back and backfill that, caulk it, and then we'll run the seaming material over that. And then it'll get a couple of coats of the Elastomeric and then a couple of coats of the finish coat. So it will have the feel somewhat of like a golf ball cover. It will be very durable and it'll last forever and indefinitely. You never have to tear anything off, and the price to put another coat on it is about 1/10 of the initial cost. Whereas if you're doing shingles, I've got a guy that I'm going to do shingles for down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, excuse me, and he's furnishing everything. He can't find anybody that'll shingle one of these domes, so that's something to think about. We do shingle. We don't like it. Now, I charge a lot of money to shingle them, and we're willing to go anywhere. So if you have a buddy out there that's got a dome and he's got shingles and he needs a roofer, call me, but you're probably not going to like the price I quote you. This stuff is, you know, it will reflect 80% of the solar gain, so you're not going to get real hot in the summertime. You can beat on it with a hammer. It's hail-proof. You're not going to get damage to it like you do with shingles. It's a really good product. And like I say, once the dome is up, 80% of the roofing is done. The windows are on, the plywood's on. You look at a hub and strut dome, you know, you got to put a piece together, a piece together, a piece together. Then you got to come on and hang on the outside of the building while you're nailing the plywood on. You know, and then you got to shingle it and you got to climb all over the top of it. That's all dangerous and it's hard and it's time consuming. All this is done in the shop in a controlled environment. It's assembly line, so it's very efficient, brings the cost down. You know, they'll sell you a kit, you know, a hub and strut kit, and tell you, oh, you and your buddies can put it up in a weekend or two. Yeah, you can put the framework up in a weekend or two, but 3 months later, while you're still trying to get it shingled, you know, it's too late to call me. Panel domes, that's what you want. You know, if you don't buy it from me, buy it from somebody else, but get a panel dome. And they don't leak. They don't leak like a conventional hub and strut type dome. No voids on the corners. We'll get into that later. Day two. We had a slow start this morning. Had to make a few mistakes and catch up on some odds and ends. But here again, you can see that when you pick it up and you put it in place, the Interior framing's done, the plywood's on, the window's on, the elastomeric roofing is 80% done. So, you know, trying to compare this to a hub and strut dome, you can't do it. You do 90% of the labor on the ground with a panel dome, and you end up with something that's strong, that's not in violation of the code.
Yep.
You line up the edges, then the bolts will go in. That's what he was doing there, tinkering, tapping it around.
Good tight fit. You like it, right?
Okay, I want to explain this to you, good people out there. Here's some more of a difference between panel and hub and strut construction. You can find this on the DVD, but in a hub and strut, the end is not cut, it's cut back like this. So your joints are not going to come together like that. The other problem is, I don't know if you can see this or not. Try to get out of this. If you put your decking on there like this, I don't know if you can see that or not. My big head in the way. Come hold this, Shannon. Hold that right there, halfway. All right. So, in a hub and strut, you're going to have this little gap underneath here. You got to split that board, and then you're going to put another piece of plywood on over here, or OSB, whatever kind of junk they're selling. And it's not going to sit flat on there. Code requires that your decking sit flat. And it's not flat unless they miter it. So if you buy a hub and strut dome and it's not mitered on that edge, they're in violation of the code. The other thing is, if you have a hub system out here on the end, you have a void underneath your decking, and that's in violation of code. And guess what? You know, everybody cries about domes leak. You know where they leak at? They leak at this joint because, number one, it's not a precision cut. When you're up there trying to nail decking on to half an inch of a board that's weathered and warped and curled, you're hanging on with one arm and trying to nail with the other. Ask me how I know. I know because you know, I learned. You know, this is a better way. Panel dome. So you get a full framing. You see how that goes on a panel? You see here? This is a full 2x underneath there, and it's mitered. You know, and it's glued. See, that's what you're paying for. You get a hub and strut under here. This has a void. You can't put a nail in there. The plywood twists and buckles because it's not nailed down. The sun hits it. It tears the paper. It's a hard joint to roof, and the next thing you know, you got a leak, and it leaks at the vertex. And that's what I got to say about the difference between panel and hub and strut. Hub and strut is a throwback to the hippie days when guys didn't know how to cut the angles and get them right. They couldn't do the measurements. They couldn't do the math. They couldn't work the chord figures. And so a guy said, well, if you just cut these off and you put a piece of PVC pipe on there and strap it on there, you got a hub system, then you nail the decking on there. Well, that's good. It'll work if you want to build a dog house or a greenhouse or something like that. But if you're going to live in it, you want to build it right. And this thing will, it'll last indefinitely. Good dome will last 1,000 years, I'll bet. Something with an elastomeric roofing. So call me. I'll put you on the path. This is the end of the third actual working day. And we've got the first course done. It actually takes a little more time to do the first two courses because you want to line all these edges up. And once you get the edges lined up and get them just so, then the rest of it should fall into place pretty easy. And they will. So we spent a little more time on this. And of course, the way we did the riser wall, putting that in took a lot of time too. If you look right down here, I don't know if you can see this or not, but I explained to you earlier how we use the J-bolts. And to do the J-bolts, you have to prop the riser wall up and transfer the marks. It's a real pain to do, and it took us the better part of a day just to get those bolts set in there. So when you look at this, that's a day right there. And then 2 days putting these 40 triangles in, which is 25% of the dome. But we spent a lot of time adjusting it and getting it just right so that our corners fit. I don't know if you can see that. We have shims in there, but the corners will come together real nice. That's the idea. We've got the shims in there to hold that apart so that when we put the next set of triangles in, they'll go in without having to fight it. It leaves us a little room, kind of like an exploded car motor. If you see a diagram of it, everything comes together at one time. Well, we kind of put this in there and we leave it a little loose and then get the next course in, and then we'll come back and pull the shims and we'll adjust those points together so that they're real snug. And you'll see here a little later on how tight they fit. They fit really precise. All right, all you farmers out there. There's just an old farm boy that did good. You need to sell some of them cows while the market's good. Get you one of these domes and put you in a ski lake. See the difference between doing a panel? If you were doing a hub and strut, you'd be on the outside of the dome trying to line up plywood to nail on that edge, and you'd only have one framing member down the middle. You see on these, if you look over here to like that, you see how there's two framing members there? Let me see. Get my finger in there. See right along there? There's a 2x on each side so that you have something to nail your sheetrock to. Whereas if you work in a hub and strut dome, then you just have one board in the middle, and all your blocking, you know, all that stuff you have to put on. It's a nightmare. I mean, if everybody that learns, there's a progression. You learn to do a 1 frequency, a 2 frequency, a 4 frequency, and you know, you learn to do a pin or a hub type system, and then when you've conquered that, then you go on to doing panel domes. And you know, there really should be a building code requirement because there's so many code violations to a hub and strut dome. They get away with it because they have an engineer to sign off on it, but it's still not good building practices. I do not recommend hub and strut. And you know, you look at this, everything is glued. All the framing is glued, all the joints fit good. Decking's glued on before it's nailed. All ring shank nails. We'll use a box of screw shank nails when we get all done and come back and nail it all together. I'm going to start guaranteeing my domes to withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds. And you know, I went to the University of Oklahoma and OSU, the engineering departments, and I talked to the professors there. I went to a couple of guys that were Boeing space frame engineers, and I worked with Norton Schmidt out of Kansas City. I talked to a retired NASA engineer. I've gone to a lot of people to find out how's the strongest way to make this dome. And here in a couple of months when we get this up, I'm going to come back to the newspapers. I'm going to tell them I'm going to guarantee these domes to withstand 200-mile-an-hour winds. And I'm going to invite all the people that I talked to before, because that was 15 years ago, maybe more than 15 years ago. And now that they have the computers are so much faster and can compute more, I'm going to have them do an analysis on this thing and see what they say. Before, they couldn't tell me, you know, at what point it would break down or if it would break down. They told me that the weakest point was how it was attached to the ground. You know, to that point, we go now and put these lag or J-bolts like they used to do 40, 50 years ago. You know, they're tied into the concrete 8 inches deep, they're a ½ inch. It's a shear panel. And I think once these engineers and people come out here and take a look at it or look at this video and they see, you know, they're not apt to go on record. You know, the codes are designed to a minimum standard, and that's what they will sign their name to. You know, I want them to say on the record or off the record that they think that it'll withstand 200 mile an hour. My domes have already withstood 140 mile an hour hurricanes, and with no problems. I mean, they've been dented up and scratched and beat up by trees and tree limbs and that sort of thing.